everything we've done in this investigation has led us to this point. This is the holy grail of interviews.
Something is happening on our very own planet, right in front of our eyes, that we can't explain. In a search for answers, we've been using powerful link analysis software to track patterns among unidentified phenomena within our skies.
This is huge. He's never talked to anyone before.
Millions of search results and thousands of pieces of evidence from across the globe have led us to this point.
They're picking up some type of sound underneath the ocean that doesn't belong, but the Navy themselves don't know what they are.
And confirmed that something out of the realm of our understanding is here.
Strange objects lurking in the oceans that cannot be explained, able to move at gigantic speeds.
We're going to find out what it is. With the amount of evidence we have and the patterns we're seeing, it feels like we're on the edge of a breakthrough.
This is much bigger than we ever thought it was.
This is insane. A UFO incident took place back in the late 70s, where, get this, humans are the target.
CIA veteran Mike Cole and conflict analyst Dr. Livingston sent a team to Brazil to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects attacking humans. Eyewitnesses on the ground claim UFOs attacked and injured residents of the island of Colares for more than 6 months.
The victim says that there were multiple witnesses, most of which were treated by a doctor, and it looks like that would be the best way to verify accounts. They're currently tracking her down. What could come from a doctor is scientific analysis of the events and possibly physical evidence. I'll do doctors, physicians, Colares, UFO. Let's see what we got.
Well, just 3 hits, not a lot. Is this the doctor? It says sketches of Colares UFOs. That must be her.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Victim of Chupa Chupa being treated for burns. This is a woman. Our person we already had was a man. There are multiple victims of this.
There are. And that is not a hallucination.
No, that's a burn. What's the other document that we got?
This is a transcript of an interview from 2014. And that's the doctor, right? Well-aged Cecim Sarvallo, primary physician on Colares during the UFO attack, and she's doing 100% of the healthcare. Look at that. She says, it was my first job. And she'd never even heard of Colares before then.
What do we have about the incident? All right, here we go. July 1977. First victim was a young girl who lived in the countryside and had a great muscle weakness. Could not speak or hear anything.
Stricken with a disease such as malaria or hepatitis, she thought. And then they said she was attacked by a light as she was lying in a hammock in the porch of her house.
Light lying in a hammock. That's the same thing that our first witness that got us on this. She says, I thought it was some kind of visual hallucination, simultaneous collective delusions. This is a doctor, a scientist essentially, right? Trained in medical knowledge, trained to think critically about what they are seeing.
This is not somebody who's going to believe stories, right?
Right. Somebody comes in, claiming this or that. One of the things you have to be able to do as a doctor is see through all that to see what the real problem is at work.
Right. You have to rule stuff out.
Yeah. But look how many of these we start getting. Only one occurrence every 3 days to start, but then it becomes daily. 3 to 4 people in a single day. In just over a month, we had treated more than 40 victims. It was a growing thing.
This should have been bigger than Roswell. Why didn't we hear about this? We need to find this woman and we need to talk to her.
The interview says that she opened up a practice in Braganza. She could still be there, she could still be alive. This is who we need to be talking to. This is the name they needed.
They also say there's a stranger incident where the military shows up, takes over the whole island to gather data in this Operation Plate.
This does seem really strange.
During the 4 months of what became known as Operation Plate, the Brazilian military took over Colares, set up surveillance posts across the island, and investigated the victims' accounts. The military claimed the operation was inconclusive and promptly classified all related files.
If what they're saying in the email is correct, what is going on here? I don't know if there's a terrestrial or extraterrestrial explanation for what happened, but the military presence on Colares confirms that something happened.
Logically, the next best step is to look at that military intervention. What was Operation Plate? It's coming up on screen.
Not much, just 3 files. Why don't we start with the bulletin board? So here are people discussing the operation. I heard the Brazilian government release some of these files. My understanding is that some of the Brazilian files have been declassified. Okay, so there could be some documents floating around. Robert Bigelow bought and owns all of the files of this incident from the Brazilian government.
We know that name. We've come across that before. Bigelow. He was the sole contractor to the ATIP program.
ATIP is the U.S. government's recently declassified Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Its sole mission was to investigate UFOs.
My gosh. Look at that thing, dude.
And its declassification in 2017 sparked international headlines as it confirmed that the United States acknowledges and cannot explain the source of UFO activity. Billionaire Robert Bigelow was an architect of this top-secret program. His company, Bigelow Aerospace, develops space habitats for private and government use, and he privately funds research at sites of high UFO activity.
This is the prime contractor involved in the U.S. Air Force's program to study unexplained aerial phenomena. And he is interested enough in Operation Plate to purchase all of the files from the Brazilian government. That cannot be a coincidence. Why is Robert Bigelow, a contractor to NASA and the sole contract to ATIP, going through the bureaucratic hurdles and spending his own money to acquire the highly classified Colares files? Let's reach out to all of our contacts in Brazil and South America and see if we can get our hands on these documents. If Bigelow can get these files, so can we.
This is a sensational event.
Yeah.
As the team waits to hear if they'll get access to the Operation Plate documents, Nick and Paul are on the ground in Brazil to meet with Dr. Valida Carvalho, the local physician at the time of the alleged UFO attack on humans in 1977.
Hi, Dr. Valida.
Hello.
The fact that we're speaking to a doctor, somebody rational, someone who has an evidence-based procedure for trying to get to the truth, that's key to us. If anyone's going to know what really happened to these people, it's her. We've heard stories from Colares, and we understand that you were there. Can you tell us what was happening to these people?
Do primeiro até o último paciente.
The story was exactly the same. An unidentified flying object released beams of light and attacked people in their houses. The beam would come through like cracks on the wall, on the ceiling. They saw the light coming towards them and they would paralyze, so they weren't able to react or to cry for help.
What kinds of symptoms were they exhibiting?
Com queimaduras no hemitórax.
And they were all really weak, with burns on the chest, and also 2 puncture marks on the neck, parallel to each other.
The people in Colares had 2 puncture wounds, just like the animals back in the US, just like the animals in Peruíbe. This seems to be beyond coincidence now.
Primeiro apareceram as primeiras 4.
Then 10, and then 20, and then 30. The symptoms were insane.
I have to ask, in your professional opinion, is there any possibility that all of this was some kind of mass hysteria or mass delusion?
Não, não existe.
She was absolutely skeptical until she saw the things herself.
Are you referring to the wounds, or did you actually see the light?
Aos OVNIs.
The UFOs. She saw the UFOs.
Three.
The ship was shaped like a plate and would release the beams of light at people.
Eu ia para perto dos militares mesmo contrariando.
What were they doing up there?
It was clear to her that they were there to record, to research, to document, and then to cover up.
De Operação Prato.
They called it Operation Plate. And sometimes she would try to follow the military on their research, and they wouldn't let her. They didn't want her to be there. And she ended up being transferred.
Really?
As a punishment because she was talking about the story.
Did they ever give you any explanation for what was going on?
Não, não.
They didn't want to disclose any of the information to the population.
We have a military sending in at least a platoon of soldiers to investigate these objects. In my opinion, something very bad happened on the island of Colares. It's imperative that we acquire these Operation Plate documents and see what they'll tell us about what happened here.
The team is joined by one of Nick's local contacts who secured a meeting with a former government official claiming to have one of the only remaining copies of the Operation Plate documents. He's agreed to turn over his files on the condition that his identity remain anonymous.
We found an Operation Plate insider. He was actually on the ground when the events happened, and once the government arrived, he helped them with the investigation. What could possibly be in these documents that would compel him to keep them all this time?
This is everything?
Isso é tudo.
How did you know what was going on?
He has connections within the military.
These documents are going to be a huge resource for us. We've got our hands on more than 1,000 pages of documents related to Operation Plate, to that military investigation. We've got to dig into this right away. All right, work here.
Nick, Paul, and their translator Eduardo moved to a cafe to dig through the Operation Plate case files for any details that shed light on what the military concluded was causing the 6-month span of UFO activity.
But tell me if I'm reading this correctly. This looks like luminous body.
Yes.
Is this indicating travel? Like a direction of travel?
The arrows, I don't know exactly what they mean.
This is going to take all night, but we have got to go through every single one of these documents because somewhere in there, buried in those pages, could be the answer to what really happened in Colares.
This is a military report from November 5th, right? It was a military unit that observed it.
Yes.
And they photographed it. Here's another one from November 6th, 77, done by the Air Force with connected photographs taken by the Air Force.
Right.
I mean, now it's not just, hearsay or witness testimony. We have official, classified Brazilian military documentation of these lights, of these objects.
That means the military didn't even know what they were dealing with. This, to me, looks like the Brazilian military thought that Brazil was under attack by some kind of unknown force. These are two different incidents, right?
Yeah, it says here they were floating over water.
Floated over the water and then moved toward Colares?
Yeah.
Interesting. And another map, look at this. It's coming in from the water, and this one comes from Colares and goes back out to the water.
We have another one from a fisherman, and he witnessed this light hovering about 2 meters on the water in Marjo Bay. It says it didn't make any disturbance whatsoever to the water, to the point that he actually thought it was a submarine. That's what he thought he was witnessing.
Huh. I think that's the bay you're seeing on the map.
The clearest pattern we're seeing is objects traveling over, near, or actually on Marjo Bay. It is some kind of center of activity.
I mean, that's very clear here. By far, the most apparent pattern here is that these sightings, both from the civilian witnesses and from the military observations themselves, are occurring on, over, and near the water. It's almost like an X marks the spot over Marjo Bay. And the logical next step, we need to get up there.
Yeah.
Now the question becomes, why is this happening over the water?
So here's Marjo Bay. God, it's huge. I mean, it looks like we're on the open ocean.
It sure does. It's a lot bigger than I expected.
Investigative journalist Paul Beeben and military intelligence officer Nick Carnesi are in the coastal town of Colares, Brazil. They track down a fisherman from the Operation Plate documents who leads them to the location where he witnessed one of the large flying objects in 1977.
About how far is it?
10 a 15 minutos. Para. A gente estava pescando aqui.
This is where he saw the lights for the first time. They would come from that side, that direction, and then 15 minutes would go by and they would come from that side. So they were like flying around.
How many were there? Was it a single light moving or were there multiple lights?
Três.
Three.
One kind of yellow, an orange one, and a red one. He thought they were actually like searching for something. He can't tell why, but it's clear that they were like gathering information.
So, yeah, their movements weren't random. They seemed to be doing something in an organized way.
Yeah.
Did the light ever shine down on you, on your boat?
The orange light hit directly at him, and it was him and his brother, and everything turned orange, like everything he could see was orange, and his brother was really like desperate. He wanted to throw himself in the water.
Muito medo, muito medo, muito medo. E até sistema nervoso do meu irmão ainda,
He was terrified because there had been attacks before in town, so he knew what the lights could do to him.
Did you see the objects land?
Him.
Fala pra eles.
Him.
They did, yeah. He saw it dive deep into the water.
Really?
Went into the water.
Into the water.
Throughout the course of our investigation, we've been looking skyward. But now we've learned these UFOs, it's not just in the sky, they have a connection to the water. So now the question becomes, have we been looking in the wrong place?
That's really strange. I mean,
you know, you think of them being in the sky,
Right.
but actually being submersible, essentially being able to transition into the water.
Right, right. The entire time, the UFOs haven't been just over the land. They've been going in and out of the water. This is much bigger than we ever thought it was. This was in 1977 when people were seeing these lights all over Colares.
Foi o que aconteceu.
Yeah, it happened in 77.
Have other people seen them go into the water since?
A lot of people have seen it. We can ask other fishermen.
Do you know these guys? Yeah.
Como é que tá a pescaria aí?
What have you seen? Tell us about the lights you've seen.
Por volta das 5 da manhã.
Says that they were fishing. It was around 4 a.m. And then they saw the lights coming from town, like just above the trees, and came towards the river. Would eventually dive into the water, so at the beach.
So you saw them disappear near the beach.
Isso, perto da praia.
How many times have you seen lights?
Quantas vezes você já viu essas luzes? That over 100 times.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Over 100 times.
They seem to end up here and concentrate here.
Yeah.
When you see the lights, are you scared?
Quando você vê as luzes, você fica com medo. It gives them sort of an anxiety, but they have to come to the sea and fish.
Right. It's like part of the routine now.
Yep.
It's hard to imagine.
Now we have multiple sightings over multiple days, and these fishermen know what they saw. An object, you know, flying through the sky, making unbelievable maneuvers, and then actually going subsurface, going beneath the water. Has he also seen the lights?
And when was this? When was the last time you saw the
Quando
lights?
foi que você viu isso?
Não,
He says it's been 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Recently,
Last
though.
time.
Okay. So it's just ongoing.
Yeah.
It comes out of nowhere, it's really fast, so he can't tell what it is.
Fishermen are describing craft coming out of the water and flying off, and vice versa. This is something that is completely foreign to their experience. It's foreign to mine. I mean, submarines are under the water, airplanes are in the sky, but I can't think of anything we have that does both of these things.
Right. I don't know of military assets that are doing this, and certainly can't think of something that could do that in the 70s. When we look at everything we've seen in this investigation so far, what is the one thing we're seeing again and again?
The thing that sticks out is water.
In Argentina, in Chile, now in Brazil, all of these incidents take place near, on, over, under bodies of water. Maybe all of these sightings are connected to water, not because these UFOs are interested in the water, but because they're capable of operating beneath it. We've been looking up, right, when we needed to be looking down.
Makes sense, sure. The amount of water on this planet, it's the majority of our surface.
Right.
And we have so little knowledge of what's going on under the waves. If you were looking to not be observed, that's where you want to be.
Right. We've only been looking in one direction, up. But the pattern that's emerging, it's pretty compelling. And it may indicate we may be more likely to find something by looking down. Not unidentified flying objects, but unidentified submerged objects, USOs.
So let's do a search. Unidentified flying submersible. Submerged. Let's see just what that pulls up. Okay. Worldwide.
Okay, well, there's a lot of hits all over the globe here.
Right.
Well, let's start with the sightings database there.
Right.
That's the Nimitz report. Why is the Nimitz report popping up? Is it because it was a aircraft carrier? You searched on submersible, right?
Tracking of the water disturbance. That's right. The initial disturbance that is seen is under the water.
We saw a disturbance in the water, i.e. like a seamount where the waves are breaking over the top, so whitewater.
You know, we looked at the Nimitz event. We saw it as a UFO event, a flying object. What if that really was a USO event? I mean, obviously there was flying phenomena happening, right? But that at its core, the real action was under the waves.
What's this last one?
An earlier UFO sighting on the USS Nimitz. A Navy photographer named Kevin Thomas was apparently on the fantail when he witnessed a huge vessel surface pretty close to the carrier. It surfaced, it flew away and out of sight. I guess it was a USO and a UFO all in one.
So there was another, not just UFO incident, but USO incident that took place on the same aircraft carrier a decade before?
Yep.
Well, if this guy's still around, he might be able to shed light on this. We need to find him.
Let's do it.
Dr. Livingston digs through the LAS to track any electronic signature on Kevin Thomas, while Mike taps into naval contacts for any information on the former sailor's whereabouts.
This dude is a ghost. He doesn't have an email address, he doesn't have a telephone.
It's like he's trying not to be found.
I have checked every commercial and even a few non-commercial sources. I can't find him. The only thing we have is a last known address in Dallas, Texas. We need to get Nick and Sarah on the ground and see if they can find him. We need to talk to this guy.
And the fact that this is the second time on the Nimitz that we've had a witness to something unexplained. This in a space of 13 years could potentially be massive for the investigation.
Astrophysicist and space journalist Sarah Cruddas and U.S. Marine Intelligence Officer Nick Carnesi land in Dallas, Texas, and head to the last known address of Kevin Thomas, a former U.S. Navy combat photographer who claims to have witnessed a USO off the Nimitz aircraft carrier in 1991.
We started this investigation with Kevin Day, who was a witness to the Tic Tac incident on board the Nimitz, the most significant video to come out of the ATIP files, and now here we are with another guy who worked on the Nimitz aircraft carrier, who also seems to have witnessed something incredible, and we need to find out exactly what this was. This it?
Yep. You ready?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's hope this guy's in. Hi, we're looking for a Kevin Thomas.
You wouldn't happen to be him, would you?
No.
No?
I did buy the house from him about 3 years ago.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you, by chance, know if any of the neighbors around here might have been around when he lived here?
No, I don't know.
Okay, we appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay, so now the work begins.
All right.
We need to knock on every door. I don't think anyone's in.
Let's jump across the street.
There must be someone around here who knew him. Hi, we're looking for a guy by the name of Kevin Thomas. He used to live across the street.
Yeah, sure, I remember Kevin.
Do you know where he moved to?
I don't. He mentioned something at one point. I think he bought a farm off 78 north of Bono,
Okay.
but I don't have an address.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right. At least we have a starting point now, though.
So here's Bonham. He said it was 78 north. He's about 58 miles from here.
Let's go knock on some doors. We now have a solid lead. Hopefully we can track this guy down. You could have information that points to contact.
While Nick and Sarah continue their search, Mike Cole and Dr. Livingston look for reports of unidentified submerged objects that exceed human technological capabilities.
So we have an article. Can you pull that up? Okay, this is from July 2015. Significant claims have been made in recent years regarding unidentified submersible objects detected by the U.S. Navy. Navy contractor Mark D'Antonio describes a sudden appearance of an incredibly high-performing object on sonar. It was traveling at several hundred knots. Both the Russians and us have fast-moving torpedoes that they could track at 200 knots, easy.
Sure.
But this says several hundred knots. The evidence is showing an undeniable pattern of USO activity. And look, I don't know if this is evidence of extraterrestrial contact. I don't know if this is evidence of some kind of military tech that we missed, but it's too compelling for us to ignore. We have got to figure out what this is.
I couldn't believe this. He's in Southern California.
He is?
Yeah.
Well, let's go check this one out ourselves. I have complete faith in the field teams, but Mark D'Antonio is close. I want to talk to this guy personally.
Through a DIA contact, Mike acquires the cell phone number of Mark D'Antonio.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Who confirms that he is currently locally contracted at the Port of Los Angeles and agrees to an impromptu meeting.
Mark D'Antonio appears to be pretty credible. He's a United States Navy contractor with access to sensitive programs. We are seeing indicator after indicator that there is unidentified submerged objects, unexplained activity under the water. He could be a key witness as to the nature of that activity.
All right, so he sent us an address here, a Navy yard down here in Long Beach.
This guy is an active Navy contractor, right? So his willingness to go on record is really compelling.
That must be him.
Mark, I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear a little more about your background and who you are.
Because the Navy has several classes of fast attack boats and ballistic missile subs, I've been involved in a lot of those programs over the years. So I worked on the Ohio class boats, the 688 Los Angeles class boats, all right, the Columbia class, the latest class, and the Virginia class, all these different variations.
So absolutely safe to say, if it's under the sea, you usually have a really good idea of how that works, engineering, capabilities, you know that area.
To my level of understanding, yes.
We came across a report with pretty extraordinary testimony about a sighting you had. Can you tell us about the ship's mission your sighting occurred on?
I can't say that, but I can say that I was at sea with the crew on board a nuclear sub. And then I'm off the side of the control room. Next to a sonar guy who's watching, he's the eyes and ears of the boat. And all of a sudden I hear, con sonar, fast mover, kind of frantic.
How fast are we talking?
He said that it was moving several hundred knots. The closest weapon on the planet that can go 200 knots is the Russian Squall torpedo. But it's very, very loud. This was very, very quiet.
How do you know it was quiet?
If it was loud, then that waterfall sonar would have just been all blown out with a lot of bright green, and it wasn't. It was a very, very faint trace.
So what you're saying is that this object that was being tracked on sonar was moving faster than the most advanced torpedoes that you are aware of?
Yes.
And was emitting less sound than the most advanced torpedoes that you are aware of. And this includes not just the United States Navy, but any Navy.
As far as I know, absolutely. And I know that our Navy guys are very, very well trained, and a sonar operator is supposed to be able to classify anything he sees. This guy didn't know what he was classifying.
How do you know he didn't know what he was classifying?
Because when the executive officer came, he actually said to the XO, "What do I do with this?" And the XO nodded, and he goes, "Log it and then bury it."
Bury it?
It was business as usual.
Really?
Business as usual. Almost
like nothing had happened?
Like nothing, and that was making me nuts. It made me realize the military, the Navy, is seeing things like this a lot. They have things like the SOSUS net is a very sensitive set of hydrophones all over the oceans. They can hear sounds thousands of miles away. And these hydrophones have been in place for a long, long time.
The SOSUS network is an array of thousands of underwater microphones installed in secret by the U.S. Navy to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. By comparing the timing of incoming sound waves at various points along the network, SOSUS can compute the speed and direction of any fast-moving underwater object. The decades-old sonar surveillance tech is now used by oceanic research organizations to study underwater sound, but its highly sensitive microphones have also picked up unexplained phenomena.
In fact, I was able to confirm there is indeed a program cataloging these fast mover things.
You're saying that the Navy has a program, the equivalent of ATIP, to track unidentified submerged objects?
That's exactly what's going on. We have, for many years, for decades in fact, been tracking USOs. But the Navy themselves don't know what they are. They're picking up some type of motion, some type of sound rather, underneath the ocean that doesn't belong And I think maybe that these underwater objects that move so quickly underwater are the culprits.
I would love to be able to get into the files of this secret USO program, but the fact that we're just now hearing about it suggests that it's highly classified. I don't know how we could possibly get to it. The next best thing is going to be SOSUS, this sonar surveillance network that D'Antonio mentioned. It's an underwater surveillance system that's in every corner of the world. That's where we need to look. It has to be hearing every USO that's active under the water all the time.
All right, let me do a search for Navy SOSUS unidentified worldwide.
Three documents. What's this one, the executive summary? 1970, SOSUS meets its match. It looks here like the Soviet Union was developing submarines that could defeat SOSUS, that were able to run silently.
Well, it makes sense. What a threat that would be to the United States of America, right? We're trying to get better at detecting the Soviets, later the Russians. The Russians are trying to get better at defeating us. This is a cat and mouse game.
And it looks like it's still going on today. We keep hearing these reports related to these USOs of capabilities well beyond the limits of any human technology. But I read that executive summary, and I think we may see advanced technology and misinterpreted it as something as not of this world. Maybe this is advanced Russian technology.
Yeah.
The fact that the Russians created technology that could potentially have evaded SOSUS makes Russian advanced military tech the last thing we have to eliminate before we can reach a conclusion that these USOs are possibly extraterrestrial.
Mike and Dr. Livingston return to the command center to track down any informants who might have knowledge of secret Russian underwater tech.
All right, we'll just keep working the phone lines.
He worked Russian sub stuff, right?
After combing through their networks, one of Mike's contacts within the DoD's Russian Navy sector is able to connect the team to a source known for deep ties to the Russian military, who agrees to share his intel.
Let's go. Be very interested in what this guy has to say.
Well, this witness is an expert on the Russian maritime power. So if anybody knows whether or not the Russians are capable of these underwater submerged objects, he's going to know.
Mike and Doc link up with Paul Stonehill, a former Soviet citizen and journalist specializing in Russian military history.
In order for us to determine that a USO is extraterrestrial, we first have to eliminate the possibility of Russian military involvement. Paul Stonehill is an expert on Russian military capabilities. He has a network of contacts in the current Russian Navy, and he may be able to give us information about the USO phenomenon. Where we're at in the investigation now is we have incontrovertible evidence that there is something going on underneath the water. And we know it's not our Navy. So is it possible that the USOs that we're seeing, that the US Navy is seeing, are actually Russian naval programs being tested underneath the water?
No, because they're also investigating the same phenomenon. The Russians have a secret program to study UFOs and USOs interfering with secret missions. For over 30 years, the Russians wanted to know who are the objects that are chasing Soviet submarines. The Soviets thought that they were dealing with the Americans, where they were seeing inexplicable things underwater, and the Americans thought that they were dealing with the Soviets. And it took so much time to figure out that it wasn't either side. We're dealing with something that we cannot explain, and it continues well into today.
What you're saying is that there is activity that neither the Russian or United States Navy can credit or explain going on underneath the waves right now.
Yes, strange objects lurking in the oceans, emitting strange sounds, able to move at gigantic speeds. Nobody has capabilities like that.
For 30 years, the Russians thought that this USO phenomenon was the United States, and the United States thought it was the Russians. If we were both wrong, then what is it?
I am positive that the high-level discussions go on, and not just discussions, cooperation.
Do you think the American or Russian military infrastructure would be able to meet that challenge?
I'm not sure, but what I have seen in the last few years is the pickup in military exercise around the world.
We're preparing.
Absolutely, we're preparing. We have to. They're responsible for billions of lives on this planet, and if they see something adversarial, our governments have to respond.
I mean, it's just frightening to imagine preparing for a war and you don't even know the capabilities of your enemy. In fact, what you know of the capabilities of your enemy is that you cannot match it.
Absolutely. I wouldn't like to be in their shoes, but somebody has to do it. And I think at the highest levels, they understand it and they're very sober about it. And in our nations, our governments are building up defenses. We may not understand the extent, but something is definitely going on. Everybody is looking in the sky at UFOs. That's nice, but you should also be concerned about what's going on down below. Objects that cannot be explained. Our military is very much concerned, and we should be as well.
All of the evidence is pointing to the water. And now we have a man with intimate contacts in both the former Soviet and the current Russian Navy saying that there is no terrestrial explanation. That's pretty concerning.
Well, this is the road.
Okay.
No one's home.
After traveling to Bonham, Texas, and canvassing houses in the area,
He actually lives right next door.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nick and Sarah receive a tip on the location of Kevin Thomas, a former Navy combat photographer who witnessed a USO off the Nimitz aircraft carrier in 1991.
Ready?
Let's do it. Hi.
Hey, sir. Sorry to bother you. My name's Nick.
And I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you.
Carnesi.
Okay, and why are you here?
I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and this is my partner, Sarah Curtis, and we're conducting an investigation, and we're trying to track down a gentleman by the name of Kevin Thomas.
That's me.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, we really want to talk to you about what you experienced on the Nimitz back in 1991.
How'd you find me?
We've been conducting an independent investigation into unexplained sightings, and we're good at what we do. We really want to talk to you because we think your account, your story, could be vital for this investigation.
Honestly, I don't want to talk about it.
We didn't come all this way to be turned away now. We have to get him to talk.
Everything we've investigated to this point has led us to you, and we really want to talk to you because we think your account, your story, could be vital for this investigation.
You're a Marine?
Yes, sir.
I'll give you a few minutes. Okay?
Thank you.
Come on in.
All right, sir.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
All these patterns that we've been gathering through this link analysis software has led us back to the Nimitz, but 13 years earlier.
Well, all I know is I made it really hard to find me. So I'm impressed you're here.
We would really appreciate it if you could just tell us exactly what happened on the Nimitz back in 1991.
I was a production petty officer in the photo lab. So I ran the photo lab downstairs for the enlisted personnel. And I got into this habit of going to watch the sunset after my shift was over to just kind of decompress. By now it's night, it's dark. So we went to darken ship, and when a ship goes to darken ship, everything gets turned off. There can be no light anywhere on the ship.
Darken ship is a defensive maneuver where all lights go dark and the entire crew locks down inside the ship in order to camouflage the ship from enemy attack. The crew isn't told if an order to go darken ship is a drill or an actual threat.
You have a certain amount of time to get inside the bulkhead, or you're trapped outside and you're not going in. And when I went to open up the bulkhead, it was locked. So I figured no big deal, I'll just write it out here. So I found my way to the starboard side of the ship, and I looked around the corner, and there was something about halfway out of the water. It looked like a huge black triangle. I would estimate it was bigger than the Nimitz at about 200 yards away.
200 yards.
And the Nimitz is what, 1,000 foot long?
I think it's 1,119 or 1,019. It was big. And I just kind of was froze there. I mean, I have this image of it just looking like this clean, dark thing sitting there with no water dripping off it.
So, did it make a sound?
No.
Okay.
I got a real clear view. It probably raised up 30, 40 feet, and then it was gone.
Did you tell anyone about what you saw?
I didn't have to. I was at my duty station the next day, and there was a guy at the front office of the photo lab, and he came back to me and said, "There's 2 guys here to see you," and nobody ever says, "There's 2 guys here to see you on an aircraft carrier." It's just very, very odd. I had a feeling at that moment, my heart kind of stopped it. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
For being out during the dark out?
Yeah, I think that maybe I saw something I wasn't supposed to see and I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble.
And were they in uniform?
No, they were just in civilian clothes.
What'd they ask you? Did they ask you?
They asked me, why didn't I make it back to general quarters? Why wasn't I on my duty station? Was I outside? And they just kept asking over and over in different ways, what did I see?
How did you feel during that?
What was in my mind at the time the guys interviewed me was, don't tell these people what you saw or you're gonna be kicked out of the military. I basically just told them I stood at the aft of the ship and I just waited until it was over and then came inside. And I was really silent about it for years until the Tic Tac footage came out. That is what really has got me thinking about this, probably the reason I let you in the door.
The Tic Tac video, released in 2017, depicts a 2004 encounter between a Navy fighter jet flying off the USS Nimitz and a Tic Tac-shaped object. The footage was released through the ATIP program and verified as authentic by the US Navy in September 2019.
What similarities did you see between the Tic Tac and then yours?
But there are some places in the video where it moves and it's like, that's the same movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it kind of went slow at first and then it went boom and it was gone. That's exactly what I saw. It went slow at first and then boom, it was gone.
At what kind of speed did it move?
Oh, supersonic. So I would have to say Mach 15, Mach 20.
Could a human survive that?
No, the G-forces would turn you into a pancake. You'd be like soup on the floor.
Was this an advanced propulsion system?
No. In order to have propulsion, that's pushing something in a direction. There was no propulsion. There was no displacement of the water when it took off. It just was there and then it moved.
Do you think it's coincidental that this event occurred during Darkened Ship?
No, I think Darkened Ship was called so nobody saw it.
Do you think somebody on that ship knew what was going on?
Yes, absolutely. I have no doubt that someone on the ship knew what was going on. And I feel that the reason that I was talked to is to make sure I didn't know what was going on.
After hearing that, he really sounds like he wants to understand what he saw.
I can't think of something that would explain what he's describing.
Is it a secret Navy program? Some kind of Navy tech that's being tested? Is it something else we're not thinking of? Or is it an actual extraterrestrial contact? The bottom line is, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. It's becoming clear why declassified programs like ATIP exist, and why powerful people like Robert Bigelow are investigating these strange phenomena occurring across the globe, because no person and no government on the entire planet can explain what's going on.
Do you think the government had something to hide?
Yes, I do. We've had multiple accounts from both military and civilians.
It wasn't until I served with CIA that I started to understand how secrets really work.
Testifying to phenomena that just a few months ago I would have believed was science fiction.
Foreigners came in 4x4s, all dressed in black.
But meeting with these people, looking them in the eye, working with a team of highly trained investigators.
We need to find out exactly what happened here.
Has made me think that some of these things I used to think were fiction may in fact be reality.
Come check this out.
It's no coincidence that Robert Bigelow, the sole contractor to ATIP, followed the evidence to the exact same spot we did in Brazil.
What was Operation Plate?
The question becomes, how much more evidence does the ATIP program have? This is an unclassified secret document. They didn't expect the public to see this. Do they already know that contact is being made?
Could this have been a UFO?
How else can he explain it?
And if this is extraterrestrial contact, why are they here? What do they want? Should we be worried?
There were flying objects that released beams of light that would hit people.
You're saying people were attacked? We got involved in this investigation to find the truth. We're going to have to continue to find the answers ourselves. We can't turn back now.